The world froze in disbelief as the History Channel shattered its regular programming with an emergency midnight broadcast. No flashy teaser, no build-up, just a blunt red screen announcement. Confirmed discovery. Oak Island's secret chamber opened. Within minutes, millions surged onto the channel, their screens filled with a live feed from the wind-swept shores of Nova Scotia. Under floodlights and drone cameras, the impossible was unfolding in real time. The sealed doors of a subterranean vault, untouched since the Crusades, groaned open as a robotic crawler edged inside. Its beams revealed towering stone arches carved with celestial precision, constellations etched into the walls like a map of the heavens. If you don't want to miss a single update on this once-in-a-lifetime discovery, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what lies beyond that chamber door is bigger than anyone ever imagined. The air was so heavy, so ancient, it seemed to carry the silence of 1,000 years. And then, as the cameras tightened in, Rick Lagina's voice trembled across the broadcast. This changes everything we thought we knew. But what the world expected to see, a simple pile of coins or a dusty chest of jewels, was not what awaited them. Instead, as the crawler pushed deeper, the chamber revealed something wholly unexpected. Machines. Giant iron gears interlocked with wooden pulleys. Pressure systems sealed in resin, all arranged with a level of engineering that looked impossibly advanced for the 14th century. Pipes jutted from the walls, their purpose unclear, while levers and counterweights loomed like guardians of the chamber's secrets. A faint glow pulsed from the heart of the structure, not from electricity, but from some kind of chemical or alchemical reaction designed to endure centuries. The crew stood frozen. This wasn't a treasury, it was a machine vault, a fortress of mechanisms designed to protect, or perhaps even to operate. Questions exploded through the broadcast. Were the Templars hiding gold, or had they built something far greater, something they didn't want the world to see? The decision to push forward came with a sense of dread, but hesitation was no longer possible. A lever was pulled, its counterweight clanging against the stone, and with a groan that shook the cavern, a second passage yawned open. Cameras swung to capture what lay inside, and this time the treasure revealed itself with devastating force. Crates, sealed with wax and iron bands, cracked open as workers pried them apart, spilling their contents across the stone floor in a dazzling cascade. Gold bars stacked like bricks of eternity glinted under the floodlights, their polished surfaces reflecting beams of light into the cameras. Coins poured out in avalanches, Byzantine, Moorish, even Spanish, each bearing the scars of forgotten empires. Jewel-encrusted chalices rolled from shattered chests, their emeralds catching the light, while golden crosses and crowns, studded with sapphires, lay in tangled heaps. Experts on site, stunned and trembling, whispered into their headsets that the hoard's value could not be less than $250 million, and that was only the surface layer, the visible portion of the avalanche. But even amidst the overwhelming wealth, details began to disturb the observers. Some of the bars bore markings, sigils not found in any mint or royal treasury, strange coded identifiers that suggested the gold was not currency but part of a system, perhaps an encoded archive. As the camera panned across the dazzling trove, an unease settled over the crew. This didn't feel like the end of a mystery. It felt like bait, a lure designed to blind with glittering riches, while something else, something far more important, remained hidden deeper in the vault. And that was when they noticed the shadows behind the stacks. Iron boxes, sealed and stacked with almost military precision, sat half-buried behind the wall of treasure, as though the gold had been placed to conceal them. When the lids were finally pried open, their seals cracking after centuries of silence, the true secret emerged. Oilskin-wrapped bundles lay dry and shockingly well-preserved, protected from time as if the Templars had known precisely how to keep them intact. Hands trembled as the manuscripts were unrolled beneath harsh white floodlights. Aramaic scrawls lined one parchment edge to edge, passages whispering of gospels no church had ever admitted existed. Latin prayers intertwined with diagrams, each carefully sketched, machines with wings, great fortresses with rotating turrets, inventions recorded centuries before their supposed creation. Greek letters danced across another page, describing star alignments and coded calculations that no one could decipher on the spot. Then the room fell silent. From one of the smaller chests, an iron clasp gave way, and a single codex slid free. Its cover, cracked but still bearing vivid red wax, carried a symbol scholars recognized instantly: the papal seal of Clement V, the very pope who had dissolved the Templars under pressure from the French crown. The implications were staggering. Why would the seal of the pope most responsible for the Templars' destruction appear here, hidden in a Nova Scotian vault? Was this codex evidence that Clement had secretly colluded with the knights, preserving documents meant to be erased from history? Scholars on site gasped, their voices carried across live microphones. This was not just treasure. This was forbidden knowledge, information powerful enough to unravel centuries of church authority and rewrite the story of Western civilization itself. But the manuscripts were only the beginning. As teams cataloged the discovery, strange anomalies began to ripple across Oak Island. Sensitive instruments deployed topside suddenly went haywire. Seismographs recorded low-frequency tremors that did not match geological activity. Compass needles spun uncontrollably, pointing not north, but dancing in erratic circles. A technician monitoring vibrations through the bedrock reported a pulse, a slow, rhythmic resonance vibrating across the entire island, as though the chamber itself had become a giant tuning fork. Crew members inside the vault grew visibly uneasy, several swearing they heard murmured voices echoing through the stone. Not voices from their radios, but a chant, deep and ancient, vibrating at the edge of perception. Some claimed it was in French, others Latin, but all agreed it felt alive. Not an echo of the past, but something ongoing. Marty argued it was interference from equipment, perhaps static bouncing off stone walls, but Rick stood still, pale, listening with a focus that unsettled even his closest allies. He whispered that this was not interference at all. It was deliberate. The chamber had been designed not just as a vault, but as a resonant structure, one that could trigger warnings or even defenses when disturbed. The curse of Oak Island, long dismissed as folklore, suddenly felt engineered. A system of deterrence created by hands that understood both stone and sound in ways modern minds could barely grasp. Even as the debate raged, a new tension emerged outside the vault. Offshore, under the pale wash of moonlight, unfamiliar silhouettes appeared on the horizon. Unmarked vessels floated silently in the bay, their navigation lights extinguished, their presence unannounced. Drones captured images of dark-clad figures watching the excavation through night vision optics. The Lagina's phones buzzed with alerts, photos, messages, fragments of documents leaking from unknown sources. They spoke of a clandestine order, a lineage of guardians said to have monitored Oak Island for centuries. These guardians were not a myth. Their existence was now undeniable. One of the messages was particularly chilling. A coded transmission slipped directly into the expedition's communication feed. Rick unfolded the paper version moments later, slipped into camp by hands unseen. The translation was short, brutal, and final. You opened what was never yours to open. Every hair stood on end. The Guardians were not asking for negotiation. They were delivering a warning, a claim that this treasure was never meant to be plundered. The gold, the manuscripts, the relics, Every piece had been placed under eternal custodianship, protected by bloodlines who had carried the duty for generations. From the edges of the dig site, shadows lingered. Men with no insignia, no uniforms, watched silently, making no move to interfere, yet radiating intent. The treasure, it seemed, was not free for the taking. It was a prize chained to an oath sworn centuries ago, an oath that did not recognize governments, laws, or television cameras. And now that the seal had been broken, the true struggle for control of Oak Island was only beginning. The pressure of that warning did not stop at the island's shores. Within days, the Vatican itself was forced into the light. Under mounting leaks, photographs, transcripts, coded fragments of the very manuscripts the Guardians claimed to protect. Historians in Rome could no longer remain silent. Cornered, they admitted that some of the Oak Island texts had already been described centuries earlier in secret ecclesiastical inventories, quietly catalogued and locked in the Vatican archives. It was not the discovery that shocked them, it was the exposure. Relics unearthed beneath Nova Scotia's soil matched chillingly with descriptions buried in papal registers. Chalices seized from the Holy Land during the Crusades, reliquaries said to contain fragments of unnamed saints, manuscripts sealed during the years when the Templars were hunted and dissolved. The Guardian's warning now had proof behind it, and officials in Rome feared what the global broadcast might unleash. If the codices revealed suppressed gospels or diagrams of forbidden engineering, the very foundation of Catholic authority, the narrative carefully maintained across generations, would be shaken to its core. The Pope himself issued a statement broadcast worldwide, but it was striking for its vagueness. He spoke not of gold or relics, but of the need for great care when dealing with discoveries that touch upon sacred heritage. It was a phrase so carefully measured that it felt less like guidance and more like a veiled directive. Why was the Vatican avoiding direct acknowledgement of the gold or the manuscripts? What were they so afraid the world might learn? Silence descended from Rome after that single statement, a silence that was louder than any denial. For many observers, it became clear that the Church was after something beyond mere treasure. The gold was irrelevant to them. What mattered was knowledge, the kind that could unravel centuries of doctrine with a single translated line. As the manuscripts were studied more closely, a shocking discovery emerged from folded parchments tucked between the pages. They were not religious texts, not at first glance, but maps, star maps meticulously drawn, overlaying the Atlantic like a celestial net. Historians pored over the alignments and realized that the symbols were not random. The parchment depicted a network of triangular routes connecting Oak Island to Portugal, Jerusalem, and even deep into South America. When the coordinates were superimposed onto modern charts, they revealed a lattice, a geometric grid spanning continents. It suggested the Templars had mapped not merely trade routes, but something far stranger. Energy lines, channels of natural force, the so-called ley lines that esoteric scholars had whispered about for decades. The implication was staggering. Oak Island was not unique, but one node in a global network of hidden vaults, each potentially holding treasure, relics, or forbidden texts. If the star maps were authentic, then the $250 million chamber was only the beginning, the opening chapter in a puzzle spanning oceans. It explained why the manuscripts spoke of guardianship and secrecy. The knights had not merely hidden wealth, but distributed it strategically across a planetary grid designed to remain invisible until the right key was found. Some experts suggested this knowledge could alter geopolitics itself. Whoever controlled the network controlled history, energy, and perhaps truths mankind was never meant to uncover. As this revelation spread, media outlets around the world exploded. CNN ran the banner, "World's Largest Treasure Found." BBC followed with, "Oak Island Secrets Shake Historical Record." Al Jazeera declared it a find that could destabilize religion and politics simultaneously. Social media caught fire. Hashtags multiplying faster than analysts could track. Hashtag Oak Island Treasure. Hashtag Templar Gold. Hashtag Vatican Vault. Conspiracy theorists surged to the forefront, claiming Oak Island's hoard was not treasure at all, but the seed vault of a new world order. Viral posts argued that the coated gold bars weren't currency but keys, part of a system designed to activate when certain nodes were opened across the globe. Millions debated in real time whether humanity had just stepped into a conspiracy centuries in the making. Financial markets, jittery already from the sight of glittering gold broadcast worldwide, began to tremble. Economists warned that injecting even the idea of a $250 million hoard into the global psyche could destabilize the gold market, particularly if similar vaults were proven to exist. Banks speculated that investors might dump national reserves in favor of these legendary caches. Almost overnight, hedge funds began shifting portfolios toward digital gold and cryptocurrency, not because they were safer, but because traditional metals suddenly felt compromised by the unknown. How could anyone guarantee the value of gold if more vaults could appear at any moment, flooding the world with centuries of hidden bullion? What had begun as an archaeological breakthrough was now mutating into financial paranoia. Families tuned into evening broadcasts not just for history, but to track the status of their savings, watching as anchors speculated about economic collapse tied to relics buried by knights 7 centuries ago. The manuscripts had proven one thing: Oak Island was not an isolated anomaly. And as the Vatican tightened its silence, as star maps hinted at further discoveries, and as markets trembled under the weight of uncertainty, one terrifying truth settled over the world. The treasure beneath Oak Island was no longer just history. It was the lever on which the present, and perhaps the future, was being tilted. Inevitably, that fear demanded muscle. Canadian naval patrols encircled Oak Island within days, gun-metal gray vessels cutting slow circles around the shoreline. Floodlights swept the waves at night, warning away journalists, private boats, and even curious locals who had long treated the island as a legend. The government framed the cordon as protective heritage enforcement, but to the Laginas it looked more like a hostile takeover. Officials strode into the dig site with binders of legal orders, citing national preservation laws and maritime salvage statutes. The discovery, they claimed, belonged not to the brothers who had dug for decades, but to the state itself, to be handled with the care of archaeological stewardship. The United States swiftly entered the fray, issuing statements of joint heritage rights, citing early colonial ties between Nova Scotia and the fledgling American colonies. Behind closed doors, diplomats argued over jurisdiction, while lawyers filed motions in multiple courts. The Laginas found themselves dragged into hearings they had no time to prepare for, facing an avalanche of international pressure. They argued discovery rights, pointing to the decades of sweat, money, and obsession they had poured into Oak Island. But they were small players compared to governments and institutions that saw the treasure as leverage. Rumors swirled through the media that secret auctions were being whispered into existence. Private elites offering billions for select relics, manuscripts, even for crates of gold to disappear quietly into private collections where no camera would ever reach them. Rick's frustration boiled over as microphones captured his raw declaration: "If this treasure leaves under secrecy, Oak Island's story dies. Everything we've worked for, gone." His words echoed across social media, galvanizing public fury, but in the boardrooms where decisions were made, sentiment mattered little. As these battles raged above ground, the excavators still probing the vault below made a shocking discovery. A secondary tunnel, narrower but unmistakably artificial, stretched beneath the treasure chamber. It had been missed at first, hidden behind stone and debris, but ground-penetrating radar traced it further and deeper than anyone had expected. At its end was a sealed door, its surface coated in hardened layers of molten lead. Etched into the door's face was the unmistakable crest of the double-headed eagle, a symbol stretching across empires from Byzantium to the Holy Roman Empire, later adopted by secret orders whispered about in Masonic lore. The find sent shockwaves through historians on site. If the gold chamber was extraordinary, this door promised something else entirely. A vault tied not just to the Templars, but to the evolution of secret societies across centuries. Technicians ran scans, and the results staggered even the most skeptical minds. Beyond the leaden seal lay a chamber far larger than the treasure room already uncovered. Its volume suggested a cavern that could hold not millions, but billions in relics, artifacts, or perhaps even something altogether different. And then came the resonance. Instruments picked up low, pulsing vibrations stronger here than anywhere else on the island, frequencies so intense that the ground itself seemed to hum in rhythm with a hidden heartbeat. The crew grew unsettled. Cameras caught Marty standing rigid at the threshold, sweat streaking his forehead despite the cold air of the cavern. His words were quiet, but the gravity of them carried through every microphone. "This isn't over. We've only opened the first lock." The world, however, was not privy to these deeper revelations. What filtered to the public was curated. Images of gold bars stacked neatly, chalices displayed under glass, manuscripts rolled into protective sleeves. The $250 million treasure was catalogued, but its story became muted, drowned out by whispers of artifacts vanishing into government vaults before documentation could be completed. Viewers demanded transparency, their outrage boiling on broadcasts and online forums. Yet every demand met the same wall of silence. Pieces of the hoard trickled into museums, often under vague descriptions and stripped of context, while rumors suggested the most sensitive manuscripts were spirited directly into Vatican custody, never to be seen again. Through it all, the Laginas stood uneasily in the middle, celebrated by the public as heroes but treated by authorities as obstacles. Rick in particular wore the burden heavily, his words growing darker with each appearance before the camera. Standing in the chamber that had consumed decades of his life, he spoke not of wealth, but of truth. The treasure was never the gold, he said flatly, staring at the sealed tunnel below. The treasure was the secret. His tone was not triumphant, but grim, as though he knew the discovery had unleashed forces beyond their control. The broadcast ended not with celebration, but with unease. The deeper chamber waited in silence, its molten sealed door untouched, its resonance pulsing like the breath of something alive beneath the island. The first vault had dazzled the world with its gold, its relics, its forbidden manuscripts. But the true prize remained sealed away, more dangerous, more consequential, and more mysterious than anything the Laginas had dared imagine. And though the cameras dimmed and the screens faded to black, the weight of what lay below pressed into the consciousness of millions. Oak Island's greatest secret was still sleeping, and waking it could change everything.